Hey, thanks for tuning in. In this video, we're going to talk about remembering what Amalek did. At the beginning of the book of Exodus, it was very apparent that God was with the Israelites. We all know about the series of signs and wonders and plagues that occurred, plagues of hail and lightning, plagues of darkness, plagues of locusts, and all the others. It was very apparent, and there was a distinction made that the Israelites were selected and they were being favored by God. And it was still apparent that God was with them even as they were leaving, even after Pharaoh decided to allow them to leave, and Pharaoh decided afterward that he was going to pursue after them. The Israelites were at first fearful, and Moses told them to be silent and that God would be fighting on their behalf. They crossed through the sea, and Pharaoh's army pursued after them, but of course, the sea covered over them, and they were defeated. In Exodus 15, the Israelites were going about singing songs of praise and saying that they knew that God was with them, and that the people of Canaan and the other peoples of the area were afraid of them and that they were melting before their presence. They were very much confident that God was with them. And why shouldn't they have been confident that God was with them? He had been telling them this all the time, and he had performed signs and wonders which people had never seen before. It was very apparent that he was protecting them, that he was making evident that he was with them. And even in Exodus 16, as they hungered, he started feeding them with the manna, the man, the miraculous food. But even though God was with them, in Exodus 17, Amalek came and attacked the people from the rear. There were people straggling behind in the Israelite party, and Amalek came, and Amalek's army started attacking them. At this point, Moses told Joshua, choose and prepare an army and fight against Amalek. So an army was mustered from the Israelites, and they went to battle. And Aaron and Hur and Moses went onto the hill overlooking, and Moses was, of course, raising his arms, and during this time, the Israelites were winning the battle. But whenever his arms started to fail, the Israelites started losing. Amalek started to have the mastery. And so what did they do at this point? Aaron and Hur took measures to make sure that Moses' arms continued to be held up. And of course, at the end of the passage, it says that Joshua wasted Amalek and his people to mouth of the sword. And it was said that God would be at war with Amalek for generations. I think this is an interesting story, partially in part to the fact that most of the time it's not remembered. And it's actually a part of the Exodus account that we are supposed to remember, that we are commanded to remember, according to Deuteronomy 25:17. We are supposed to remember what Amalek did to us in the way. But oftentimes when we talk about productions that describe the events of the Exodus, usually it just goes through the plagues upon Pharaoh and upon Pharaoh's people and kind of skips ahead to the revelation at the mountain. This part is often not remembered. And I think there are several things that we could draw upon it. For one thing, the fact that the Israelites were protected and that God was with them along the way did not prevent Amalek from attacking them. They still had to take decisive action and prepare and fight back against those that intended to victimize them. That even though God had made very apparent that he had chosen them, that he was with them, and he was performing signs and wonders in distinguishing this, Amalek still came from behind, attacked them, and they had to take decisive action in response. They actually had to do something and not just sit around and allow whatever to take place that was going to take place. Now, of course, one could draw some literal parallels to this in looking at how the Jewish people, or the tribe of Judah largely, has been handled throughout history. They have allowed themselves repeatedly, after the defeat in the Jewish-Roman Wars, to essentially be preyed upon and victimized. And this even continues to this day. Not that many years ago, there was this knockout game that was going on where Jewish people in New York, from my understanding, were being targeted and attacked with muggings and otherwise just physical assault. Of course, the Jewish people in general have allowed this to go on. They do not really seem willing to do anything to protect themselves. But I think we could draw other things from this as well. I think there are some less literal parallels to this. One example is talking about sharing the Torah with other people. I've heard repeatedly people saying that, well, it's just up to God whether people are going to come to the Torah or not. It doesn't really matter what we do. I think in a large part, this is just deciding to not take any action. This would be akin to, for example, whenever Moses' arms started to fail, just, well, I guess that must be God's will, so whatever's going to go on is going to go on. Oh well, I did what I could, that's that. Instead of actually taking action, taking measures to actually strengthen his arms, to get help. Now, we could look at situations like sharing Torah, and we can say that, well, it's just up to whether God has softened the heart or not. And maybe that is true in part. But how do we know whose hearts have been hardened or softened? We don't even know what the impact or the eventual impact of what we have shared thus far will be. We may have shared the truth with someone about the Torah, and maybe they rejected it for now, but maybe in the future it will be called to mind. We don't know that. And maybe the problem does not lie with whether someone's heart has been hardened or not. Maybe it's us that need to continue practicing, to learn different ways to present the information. Maybe we have been in a few situations where we have attempted to share the Torah with people and we have perceived ourselves as failing. We have perceived it as just not working out. It's true that we can just give up, but maybe we just need to learn a different way to do it. For one thing, I personally don't think that I am just perfect at presenting information. I believe that there are certain improvements that I can make and continually want to make. But at a point, I realized it does no good just having me sit around. The time is now that we need to actually be taking action. It's too late to just be waiting around and trying to approach it more carefully and more with preparation, per se. It's time to actually take measures to share the Torah with people now. And so maybe we have not had success thus far, but that doesn't mean we will always not have success. And just like in the situation with Amalek, Moses could have just given up. Or Moses could have taken no action at all. He could have just said, well, I guess this is just going to take place, whatever's going to take place, and not told Joshua to prepare the army to defend them. But instead, we know that they did. They did prepare the army. They did begin to fight back against Amalek. And Moses and Aaron and Hur, they all took action together, and they continued to take corrective action to make sure that things would be resolved even when things initially were not necessarily working how they wanted to. When Moses' arms started to fail, they didn't just give up. They took corrective action. They learned from what was going on. Maybe we need to learn. Maybe we need to learn some new skills. Maybe we need to take some kind of action. Now, I think it's important that we recognize what literally is going on with the Amalek situation. Any kind of symbolic meaning or metaphoric meaning, or any kind of application that we are taking from this to our personal lives, while it may have use and while it definitely could be useful for us to do, we still need to recognize that symbols and metaphors do not override what was plainly going on. We still need to look at this as a literal incident. We still need to recognize it as an actual physical occurrence with actual fighting between the Israelites and the Amalekites. And we need to remember this. I do not claim to know the exact reason that we are to remember this, or the exact learnings that we are to take from this. But I recommend that we consider this, that we think about this incident with the Amalekites, that we draw attention to it. Because in Deuteronomy 25:17, we are commanded to remember what Amalek did to us in the way. Thanks for watching. Feel free to check out some of my other videos about other Torah issues, and be sure that you stay in touch so we can continue this discussion. Thanks for watching. Remember the commands. Peace.